This is an analysis of the knee during running by me, Sam McClellan. So first, let's talk about running. Running has been around for a very long time. Human ancestors, it's estimated that they have been running for about 2 million years. And first off, I'm talking about endurance running, not sprinting, so running for long periods of time. So initially, this running was used for hunting and helping us compete with the other wildlife. However, now, since we've developed more tools and whatnot, running is less survival oriented and more just for better health. It leads to increased happiness, a longer lifespan, maintenance of weight, and it reduces the risk of cancer, along with many other benefits. So, the knee, which is also known as the tibiofemoral joint, is the joining of the femur, which is on your thigh, and the tibia, which is your shin bone, and your fibula and patella, which is your kneecap. It's a synovial hinge joint that's formed between the femur, the tibia, and the patella, and its main function is to help support the body weight. This is utilized in standing, walking, running, kicking, jumping, pretty much anything where you're on your feet. The knees are helping you stabilize. The main muscles involved are the quadriceps, the hamstrings, and the calves. We'll get into the specific muscles in a little bit. In the knee, so we're going to be talking about the knee operating in the sagittal plane. It does have a little internal and external rotation, however, we're not going to talk about that today. So, movements of the knee. The two main movements that we're going to be looking at are flexion and extension. So knee flexion, you can think about knee flexion as bending the knee, whereas you can think of extension as the opposite of flexion. You're extending the knee, you're moving it closer towards locking the knee joint. So the main muscles involved in knee flexion are the hamstrings, which include the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, and the biceps femoris. Also the sartorius, the gracilis, the popliteus, and the gastrocnemius, which is also known as the calf. The main muscles involved with extending the knee are the quadriceps, which are the rectus femoris, the vastus medialis, the vastus intermedius, and the vastus lateralis. As I said before, we won't be talking about internal or external rotation. So here is running. I know everybody has seen running before, however, this is what it looks like at its very best. Eliud Kipchoge is maybe the best runner to ever live. He has essentially. So here are the running phases. First, there's the initial foot contact, which is the loading response. Next is the mid stance, and the next is propulsion, and these all make up the stance phase. The stance phase occurs when the foot is on the ground and before the foot leaves the ground. So the foot is on the ground the entire time during the stance phase. And then the next is the swing phase, and you can guess that the foot is not on the ground here. I just broke it down into 1, 2, and 3. And yeah, we'll get into these more now. So the initial foot contact. So this is when weight is being accepted onto the legs. The foot is making its initial contact with the ground, and basically this is when your foot touches the ground for the first time. Your knee is initially extended before, however, upon reaching the ground, it flexes a little bit, and at contact, the knee angle is 15 to 19 degrees. As I said, before contact, the knee flexes, meaning that the biceps femoris are already activated due to their role in controlling the landing of the foot. So, yeah, the hamstrings muscles are prime movers in knee flexion. So the hamstrings here are the prime movers, whereas the quadriceps muscles, the vastus medialis, the vastus intermedius, the vastus lateralis, and the rectus femoris, these are antagonists as they contribute to the backward acceleration of the mass center, which is a fancy way to say braking, and this is slowing down the forward speed. however providing stabilization also. And the gastrocnemius is also activated during this initial loading rate. So to the right, we have a graph. It's the activation of the biceps femoris long head over the duration of the gait cycle, which is one full running motion. And as we can see, so the vertical line that's a little off center to the left represents the the takeoff of the foot from the ground. So we're going to be looking at the left side of that, the very far left here, since it's the initial foot contact. And as we can see, the hamstrings were already activated before the foot even hit the ground. And so we can see that activation right there during the initial foot contact. Next, we're going to talk about the mid stance. So this is when the body's weight is being passed over the supporting leg. The foot is still on the ground. This is different from the initial contact because during the initial contact, the foot was a little bit farther in front of us, whereas now the body has moved over the supporting leg a little more. And here the knee flexes to about 45 degrees as it prepares for extension in the propulsion phase. So the knee is flexing, which means that the quadriceps are antagonists here again. The rectus femoris, the vastus medius, the vastus intermedius, the vastus lateralis. These all eccentrically contract. This is for power absorption and support. The power absorption is, you can think of that as like a shock absorber. We need something to take in the shock of hitting the ground, or else we get some things like stress fractures and whatnot. We don't want that stress being on the bone. This force can later be turned into force to push us off the ground. So that's what the quadriceps do there. And in addition, the ground reaction helps maintain the knee flexion. So on this graph on the right, we have the knee flexion and extension during the gait cycle in the degrees on the y-axis. So we can see that the mid stance is not all the way to the left. However, it's the small hump. It's the peak of the small hump there. We know that the knee is flexing here, and it's not flexing very much, but just enough to where we can extend it a good amount afterwards to propel ourselves off the ground. And so propulsion. This is when the knee extends, which is essentially pushing the body forward and up and off the ground. This is what makes us go forward and up, I guess. And this is when the knee extends from 45 degrees to 20 degrees. We can see that angle getting a lot smaller. There's strong activation of the gastrocnemius. This generates the force for forward propulsion. The gastrocnemius here is a prime mover. Kind of acts like a spring here and pushes us forward. Whereas the quadriceps are also synergists here. They resist the forward motion. However, during knee extension, the quadriceps are very essential to that, and so they concentrically contract, which is generating power and pushing us forward. Here the hamstrings accelerate the mass center downward before the foot leaves the ground. They're antagonists here. And if we're looking at the graph on the left, we can see the gastrocnemius. So this is its activation over the gait cycle, and that vertical line, since that's when the foot leaves the ground, we can see that the gastrocnemius is heavily activated right before we leave the ground, and then it's not activated anymore after that, so we can tell that pushes off the ground right there. And then on the graph on the right, once again we can see that the slope decreased a little bit right before the vertical line, which is the foot leaving the ground, and this means that the knee is extending. So that's a good visual representation there. Now we have the swing phase. So this is when both feet are in the air after propulsion. So here we're extended, and it begins to flex a little bit. Once the knee reaches around 90 degrees. It's driven forward via hip flexion. However, we're not going to get into that because we're just talking about the knee. And then it extends more before touching the ground again. And during this phase, there's not much power that's generated by the muscles. However, they do absorb power, which is used to help control the movement of the swinging leg, and kind of like driving our knee and whatnot. So yeah, the early swing, the quadriceps contract to prevent excessive knee flexion. This is working as an antagonist here. Yeah, we don't want to flex our knee too much here, so the quadriceps, which are for knee extension, do help with this. And as we can see on the graph on the right, the knee flexes to its highest point during this early to mid phase. And so, yeah, we can see it flexes to about 90 degrees at its peak right there. And continuing on the swing phase, during mid swing, only the rectus femoris is active. This restrains the posterior movement of the tibia during knee flexion, and this is working also as an antagonist. And if we look at the graph on the bottom right, we can see that, like during that middle section of the swing phase, there's nothing else, no other muscles that cross the knee are activated except for the rectus femoris, which is interesting. So now onto the late swing. This is the last phase of the swing phase. This is when the hamstrings, specifically the biceps femoris, contract eccentrically. Here they are working as antagonists as we extend our leg and as it approaches the ground. We're controlling the movement of the tibia. We're preventing knee hyperextension and decelerating the tibia before ground contact. So the hamstrings are working with all of those things. And in addition, the vastus medius, the vastus intermedius, the vastus lateralis, and the rectus femoris, the quadriceps, they all contract in preparation for the ground impact. And here they are, the prime movers. So also the downward motion of the leg is due to gravity and the hamstrings lowering it down. So, in conclusion, running is an effective, popular, and accessible avenue towards leading a healthy lifestyle. Thank you.